Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Dolsky, and you are listening to, once again, another exciting episode for the Women of Horror Month. And with me today is none other than the lovely lady that is doing the latest campaign for Kickstarter of, well, she's going to just have to just, I guess, correct me nonetheless, because I don't really know how else to put this, but it's a steampunk. I don't know if this is like a standalone or if this is some sort of continuation, but that's where she can correct me, of her series, Boston Metaphysical Society, and her latest one that is going to be coming out because it did get funded on Kickstarter and is now unlocking stretch goals as well. And for the first time ever, you can also get a coloring book for the Boston Metaphysical Society. And with us is none other than the writer-creator, Madeleine Holly Rosen.
Hi, Paul. How are you doing?
Good. I did pronounce your name right?
Yes, you did. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Sweet. Well, I'm usually pretty bad with names because I have a small speech impediment, so sometimes some names will take me a couple tries.
No worries. You got it. All
right. Well, Madeleine, thank you for your time, for coming on for the show, and happy Women in Horror Month, because I don't know if you even knew that, because quite frankly, I didn't know such thing existed until last year. So,
no, I think I heard about it last week, because I do know a number of female horror writers. So they've been talking about it on Facebook. So it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, it is, and I like what they do too for every year, and I can't believe it's been on for like 11 years, and I'm like, really? How come I just heard about it now? Last year, but yeah, it's nice, a little change up.
Yes.
Yes, and so Madeleine, to kick things off, so tell me a little bit about yourself, because I know like you're into the steampunk, you're into like the horror, the paranormal, and historical aspects of like oh God, what would be the correct term for this? Almost like it would like the past but the future.
Alternate history.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, that's just clever enough. Well, not clever, but you know what I mean.
Yes,
it fits.
Yes, absolutely. Well, just to let your audience know, in case they have never heard of Boston Metaphysical Society before, the overall series is about an ex-Pinkerton detective, a spirit photographer, and a genius scientist who battles supernatural forces in late 1800s Boston. We started with a 6-issue miniseries, which we finished a few years ago. Emily Hugh was the artist for that. And since then, after we took it to trade, so it's all in one volume now. And since then, we have produced 3 standalone sequels. The first one being Scourge the Mechanical Man. The second one was Spirit of Rebellion. And what we currently have on Kickstarter right now is one called Ghosts and Demons. And they do all link, but yes, they are all standalone. And we are fully funded and actually going into stretch goal number 5 right now. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that is a big accomplishment. And I was lucky enough to find out about your project last year when the other Kickstarter campaign that was going at the time, I believe, unless they were already ended, but the Irons Anthology. So.
Oh, yes,
Yeah, so that's how you got a backer from, well, that's how I backed your project, was through them, really, because they mentioned it, and so I was just like, I'll take a look at this, and then that's when I was intrigued, and that's when I messaged you to figure out the whole collection thing, so that way I kind of could, not start somewhere where I'll probably get confused or something, so.
Yeah, I wrote a short sequential art story for the Irons Anthology that I think might be in the second volume. It's not in the first volume, but I think probably in the second volume. So hopefully sometime in the near future, we'll get to see that one come to life, because that one was a lot of fun to write. But yeah, my idea with writing the standalone sequels is I never have any idea how people are going to enter into the series. I mean, you could just be at somebody's house and have a copy of Scourge the Mechanical Man or something and, sit down to read it. And I want people to have an enjoyable experience and a complete story, but have enough open-endedness so we can keep going and have more story later on.
Very cool. I was going to ask, is there any type of way that you are going about writing these stories anyway? Or is it one of those where I kind of hear a lot from people where they don't really have an idea? It's just more of let's see where I'll get I don't want to say writer's block, but the writing really goes with the flow, I guess. So is that what going on here? Is you're just kind of going with what would be best, or what would maybe help tie into the story? Because I guess what I'm trying to figure out is Ghosts and Demons. Is this sort of the continuation after the Spirit of Rebellion?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I do add a prologue and an introduction to the book, so you can get caught up. But you could just start reading it and you'll get it. You'll understand the story, no problem. But it just enriches the story. And as far as your previous question is, I pretty much have an overall plan for the series, but often I will take, little detours when, something happens with a character and just something tells me that I need to go forward on something that, a character has done maybe in a previous story, which is kind of what happened with Ghosts and Demons. Ghosts and Demons is inspired by a short story that I wrote a few years ago called Hereby Monsters, that was published in an anthology called Sometime Later by Thinking Ink Press. And it was Duncan the Ghost's origin story, and you meet Duncan early in the original 6-issue miniseries, but I decided early on that at some point I needed to write Duncan's story of, how he became a ghost. So that's what that story is. And what I did was take a character from that story and put it in Ghosts and Demons, which essentially bookends the two stories. The way I write, there's linkage in every story. There may be a complete story into itself, but there's little things that link it to other stories that I've written, that either in prose or in comic format, that just enriches the whole experience for the reader. Fair
enough. I like that. I like the, I definitely thought when I started with the miniseries, like you were mentioning, it became into a whole trade paperback, which was nice. And I believe it came with I don't have it in front of me right now because I have way too many things to go find it. But it did come with a small little prologue in that one too, right? Or some sort of
I know what you're talking about. The trade paperback has an exclusive short story in it called Hunter Killer.
Yes.
And there I introduced 3 new characters, and what happens there is actually occurs about 35 years prior to that miniseries, and is the start of what I call the House Wars, which is the equivalent of the American Civil War. It's essentially, Hunter Killer is an airship battle, which is my equivalent of Fort Sumter, where the Civil War started.
Wow.
And that's actually linked into another novel I'm rewriting right now, which is going to be a trilogy. It's called House Wars, and it's essentially the first year or so of the Civil War. But in the Boston Metaphysical universe, it's against the northern houses and the southern houses as opposed to states.
Wow. Yeah, that was another thing I was noticing is like your story definitely had that feel of a historical view, especially with like Tesla and all the mechanical experiments that were going on, especially with the way they talk and how they what's the word I want to say, to kind of like interact with the world around them, if that makes sense. So that's what really I want to say grabbed my attention besides the whole paranormal aspect. But I just like I like seeing stuff where you take like historical things and you throw it in and make something out of it versus like coming up with somebody new and trying to say like, you know, this is history, but it's not history, if that makes sense too. Because it's weird like that, but it's also neat to see. Because I'm assuming, because I actually no, not assuming. I think I asked you, don't you do research when it comes to the I don't know if I want to say the writing or the events of what's going on.
Yeah, I do a lot of research on history and people. In the original 6-issue miniseries, there are historical figures present. They are an integral part of the storyline, and they are Bell, Edison, Tesla, and Houdini. And the African-American gentleman, Granville Woods, who is part of the Boston Metaphysical team, is a historical figure as well. I found him in my research and really liked what I saw and made him part of the team. The characters of Samuel Hunter and Caitlin O'Sullivan, they are fictional.
Very nice. Very cool. Yeah, I like that a lot. Now, when you came into this with the paranormal thing, just out of like a personal question too, and because usually anything paranormal I gotta ask anyway, but are you a believer in the actual paranormal?
Actually, no.
Hey.
No, I'm not, but I love stories about it. And it really, you know, it excites my imagination, and I just really like dealing with it because you get to deal with an imaginary world, but yet you can reflect real world events within it. And it's just a nice way to world build. And myself personally, I just find it extremely entertaining. It's fun. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to believe in it to have, you know, fun with it and be imaginative in it.
No, there's nothing wrong with that answer. I was just curious because usually...
No, I've had people ask me that before.
It's always just interesting to me because like some people will find it interesting, and then there's people that go, yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Which is fine either way. But no, I actually had some weird experiences that happened to me, so that's why I don't think there's just no way we are the only things around that we can't really see either. So I definitely think there is more than what we cannot see, but we just have to search more behind the naked eye, I guess would be the proper term, I think.
But to take the contrary point of view, I actually think that science eventually will be able to explain all of that. Since we do have as human beings, we do have limited vision. We can't see, all the color spectrums. We can't see a lot of things because of our own limitations, but yet I think the human brain is capable of amazing things that we have yet to even discover. I mean, since we only use a small portion of our brain now, imagine what it would be like if we could use even 5% more. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we aren't even using the full brain, and if we were using the full brain, I mean, like you just said, like, how much of a difference is there really? So, and they always say too with kids that the kids are more developed in any way, extent they're young and stuff, where as you grow older and stuff, we kind of start to I forget that word, like I really forget the technical way that they call it, but as you grow up, it's like we lose more of the usage of our brain. So like it's like since we don't use that section, I'll just say, of the brain, it kind of just locks it because we just don't use it. And then as we grow older, it's just like we don't really have that ability like we probably did when we were younger. So it's always interesting to see and hear stories too about little kids and their imaginary friends, whether there really is an imaginary friend there or not, or stuff like that. So it's always cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do try to add accurate science whenever I can. And unfortunately, I can't a lot of times because the story and story development, character development wins out. But there'll always be little tidbits in the comic of real science. And particularly in issue 2 of the original miniseries, Granville is in his lab, and he discovers a substance called yttrium barium oxide, and of course Samuel and Caitlin look at him cross-eyed, not understanding what it is, but a chemist or someone is going to understand what that residue is. So that's kind of, I put that in for them, and so whenever I can do that, I do that because it's fun, and it also grounds the science too.
Right, and it helps you think more too. For somebody like me that's not really knowledgeable in the science, but I mean, it's always cool to open somebody else's mind more and be like, oh, that makes sense, or it makes them or me kind of stop reading for a minute and do my own investigation to just look it up online just to kind of be like, oh, okay, so that's what she means by blank of whatever part I'm reading in your book. So that way it helps make me feel like, okay, that's where you can see her research. So that way it's like it all makes sense and everything else.
Yeah, because if you're not familiar with the substance and you go Google it and you go like, oh, that's a real thing. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I like
real thing.
Yeah, that's why I like reading your the Boston Metaphysical, because it's like you put so much real things in there that really does or should make other people kind of stop reading and do the research, which is nice because usually it's just like, oh, you're done and that's it. You know what I mean? The question is, the answer is already there, so why do you need to question it even more? It's already answered. So yeah, it's just interesting nonetheless. But out of curiosity, what kind of started you to want to create a comic anyway?
I kind of fell in it almost by accident. I had originally written Boston Metaphysical as a TV pilot while I was at UCLA Film School. I was in the MFA program in screenwriting. And a friend of mine, originally it wasn't steampunk at all. It was just a period paranormal detective story. And a friend of mine suggested I turn it into steampunk, which I had heard of, but hadn't really read much. So I researched that, realized they were right, redeveloped it, and sent it off to some competitions and around, and it got good feedback, but, this was over 10 years ago, so steampunk really hadn't gone mainstream, and it's expensive to make because of costuming and all that other fun stuff. So it was suggested to me that I turn it into a graphic novel to use it as essentially marketing to go back and sell it to TV or film or something like that, which I did. But in the meantime, I fell in love with writing comics. So here I am. You guys are stuck with me, like, forever.
Well, yay! I'm not trying to say yay as in like, oh boy, we're in for it now, but yay! No, I as long as you're giving us based on the real things and it comes out to be a great story, then yeah, I can't wait to see the next story. I mean, when I got done reading all of your stuff, when I was reviewing them for our site at the time, I was like, man, I can't wait for the next one, whatever happens next. So, and then
and Gwen Tavares is the artist for the 3 sequels. She took over from Emily, and that's because Emily moved on to bigger and better. She's doing storyboards for Nickelodeon and Warner Brothers and other places. But Gwen, I loved working with both of them, and Gwen has been terrific. And like any good artist, she gets better with every issue. So it's been pretty awesome working with her.
Yeah, and she has, I can't even express like the artwork that she brings out, especially for the wow, what was I just about to say? The other comic series that I know her from too, because I didn't realize she was actually a part of your universe. Because I know her for the Amelia Sky one, and then when I noticed that she was doing your stuff too, I was like, wow, she can really like go in between so many different type of stuff that she could basically do it all.
Yeah, she can go through a bunch of different styles, and I think mine is the most detailed. I mean, she impresses the hell out of me constantly. I mean, early on when she was, when she first came on board and was doing the first sequel, she was doing research onto men's socks in the late 1800s and women's shoes, and so everything is correct. From the amount of buttons on the shoes to the designs on the socks to everything. So, yeah, she's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I can't give her enough credit. I'm surprised, like, I never really seen a lot more of her stuff. As far as I know, it's just your series and Amelia Sky, so I don't know what else she has done or is doing, so I need to find out more of her work so I can really get more of her artwork thrown at my face, really, but see what else she really can do. So
yeah, she does. I know she does a lot of pinups also for various Kickstarters. There's one thing I'm always happy to say that artists and who've worked with me have usually gone on to bigger and better, and they always get other work because, as you've seen, I do a lot of promotion. I'm out there a lot. I do a lot of Comic-Cons, so people see their work, and so they get hired for other stuff, which, thrills me to death, of course, as long as it doesn't interfere with my own stuff. It's like, yes, Gwen, you can do whatever you want as long as you finish my work first. But I'm just like every other creator that way.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, it's your project. You want to get it done and out there. And in this case, you definitely want to get it out there because you're running a campaign and you don't want to upset your customers, I think would be the best way to put it. Your backers, really, because even though Kickstarter is not a store, but it's still nice to, I guess, call it a customer because they believe in your work enough that they pre-order it.
Yeah, and she's done with the art. I'm reviewing the lettering right now, so it will probably go to my pre-press guy in a day or two.
Even does lettering too? Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, yeah, no, as it's people who've been with me for a while know that everything is usually ready to go to the printer by the end of the campaign. And this is no exception. So, yeah, it's as soon as the money clears, it's off to the printer.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I couldn't really remember that far back.
That's okay. That's okay.
But, some people, which I wish a lot of people did that, to be honest, like what you do, like another company does for their comics, where, like you just said, once the money clears, they send it to the press, printer, and then next thing you know, you just get that email that just said, hey, your stuff is heading to you, so thanks again and all that stuff. And then it's just like, oh, nice. Now I don't have to wait almost a year later for some other projects that are like, dude, what is going on here?
Yeah, in fact, our next stretch goal, if we make it, I think we will, because we do have 14 days left, but is that will give us enough money to be able to print in North America as opposed to overseas, which cuts like a good month out of waiting. So, that's my goal is I really want to make that stretch goal so everybody gets their books earlier.
Because of, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see that, and kind of like what you just said. You got 2 weeks left. I don't see any reason why you can't hit it. So
yeah, I think we will. I think we will. It's just, it's like 14 more days to go.
Yeah, it's just like 14. Just come on already. Yeah, it's always fun though, and you've done 8 Kickstarters, and you've also published like what was it called? The Kickstarter for the Independent Creator book, I want to say too.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that is correct. I have one nonfiction book, and as you said, it's called Kickstarter for the Independent Creator. I wrote it a few years ago because I saw a lot of great projects on Kickstarter doing the crash and burn because the creators just simply weren't ready to launch. And so it's essentially a field guide to running a crowdfunding campaign. And it is, the references, of course, are to comics, but the strategies are the same for any project. I go over like pre-launch strategy, campaign strategy, fulfillment, how to fill the, how to find your backers. There's resources in the back. But yeah, that's on. You can get either a paperback copy or an ebook copy, through Amazon or any ebook platform you're on.
Nice.
But yeah, a lot of people have told me they found it to be very helpful and have helped them succeed because it really is a step-by-step guide. So say you already have, your fan base, you have a really good email list in hand, you've been doing a lot of cons, So that part you have in hand. So, you can start at, pre-launch strategy and starting to get all those things lined up.
That's interesting. I might have to look into that now. So, because, as you know, I want a Kickstarter last year for
your short, right?
Yeah, for my short horror film, which surprisingly it did fun. But I mean, I was talking with a couple other people too, and they're just like, well, what if you message the other people that you actually back and see if they will, back your project for helping their stuff come back to life? I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I like that idea, but because I'm not one that really just say like, hey, I'm not trying to say like, give me like I guess what I was trying to thinking of is like, I don't want to say like, hey, because I gave you money, can you give me money? It's like, okay, well, how do I make it sound like I don't want to be that type of guy that just says, hey, I'm that guy that brought your project to life. How do I do it? So I know I messaged you about it, and I sent like a mass message to like everybody that I could like message across all the projects that I did. So I do thank you there, Madeleine.
You're welcome. What I would suggest, and for the future, and what I have found to be a win-win for creators, is swapping promotional update posts. Like for instance, or if you find someone who you think there's these 2 games that are going on. In my latest update, I actually plug 2 games that have steampunk themes in them, and they're essentially swaps. So they will mention me in their Kickstarter update because they have an audience who we both believe would be interested in mine, and vice versa. That's actually more beneficial than asking people who have, you have backed for money, because you're going to get more eyeballs on your project. And unfortunately, and this is kind of the dark side of Kickstarter, someone may back you, but then their credit card doesn't go through at the end of the campaign.
Right.
Because I've actually been, when people say like, oh, I'll back you if you back me, and I don't do that anymore because I've gotten stiffed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's why, no money crosses hands anymore. But what I will do is, hey, Paul has this great horror thing going on, short film, do a little blurb, and here's the link to his project. And, whoever reads the update, if they're interested in it, they'll go click through and take a look and decide for themselves. But you're going to get a lot more eyeballs on your project that way. Right.
And I guess listening to you now, I'm trying to figure out how to exactly word this. But if you're going to plug another project, which I like the idea, because like you just said, it helped, find another project that somebody might be interested in because they didn't hear about it or whatnot. And would that be because you yourself backed it and then you mentioned them? Or
no, I don't necessarily back them. No, it's called cross promotion. It's a marketing technique.
Mm-hmm.
And many of us do it. I'm sure you have backed, particularly in the comics world, I'm sure you have read updates from comics you've backed, and, at the top of the update, you have the information from the creator of, like, what's going on, where they're at, and then towards the bottom of the update, it'll say, like, hey, there's these other projects going on that you may or may not have backed, and say like that might be of interest to your audience. Like these two games, they make perfect sense for my audience. They're both steampunk themed. I went and checked them out. They looked really fun. They looked really interesting. And so I think my audience would actually benefit from knowing about them. And then my audience, my backers can take a look, make their own decisions, and then they do the same for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then when they back, they can tell that new project that you just mentioned, like, hey, I found you guys think to so and so in a way. So, and then they'll be like, oh, cool, and then they'll maybe check out yours because you got a couple people messaging that new project that you just plugged in or networked with, cross promoting and stuff like that. Yeah, that makes sense, and you're keeping it in the same genre, so that makes sense too.
Yeah, and we contact each other. Both of the games creators actually contacted me, and I said, and before I even responded to them, I went and checked out the game to see if it was appropriate, because I won't promote any. It's got to be PG-13. I don't want any, overt sex and violence. It has to be appropriate for my audience. And and I looked at them, they fine. I said, yeah, let's do this. Let's cross promote, and it's done.
Hey, that makes sense.
And everybody wins. It's a win-win for everybody.
Well, I hope that my little short film wasn't too violent for you then.
Oh, no, it was fine.
Well, great. But no, that really does help a lot because, when I was debating to do a Kickstarter, because at the time I wasn't really thinking of doing one, because I was like, maybe I'll just do it myself, but then I see, all these great things about Kickstarter, and I know how people love the indie world most of the time anyway. It helped you get out there too and stuff like you have made a name for yourself with Boston. I know that for sure. And I don't see how one project of yours can't be funded because you do everything to the dot. Like you mentioned earlier, once the money clears, you send it over to the printer, and then it comes back to you, and then you just get it out there. So it's never anything worried about. You're always on time, and there's nothing bad to say about what you do. So
well, thank you. I try very hard to I'm very conscientious about delivering to the backers. They are essentially my customers, and I want them to have excellent customer service from me. They know they can depend on me to deliver, and so there's no issue there. And I'm really proud to be able to say that.
Yeah, exactly. Once you have the customers in the grasp of your hand of your why am I brain farted right now? Your liability, because you are reliable. Oh, no. You're good at it. You, like I said, you just have it.
Thank you.
On your head.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now I think we need to talk about the coloring book.
Yes, the coloring book.
The coloring book. Yes, the first ever Boston Metaphysical Society coloring book is suitable for all ages, and the illustrations are done by Alejandro Lee. And I've known Alejandro for quite a while. We met at probably some steampunk convention years ago. I love his work. He has his own comic called for kids called Piston Pete and Sally Sprocket. It's very cute. And I just knew that his style would complement Gwen and Emily's in a coloring book form. So I went ahead and talked to him. We, worked out a budget, and he's off to the races. So he's finished 13 of the illustrations. So he only has 7 more to go. So he should easily he'll be done by the time we're done. And the pre-press on that shouldn't take much time. But yeah, the illustrations, of course, include the main characters, Samuel, Granville, and Caitlin, but there'll also be illustrations of Bell, Edison, Tesla, and Houdini, the Tesla tank, Caitlin's parents, the shifter, some scenes, some Boston scenes, a lot of fun stuff. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. I had to upgrade my pledge for that way I could get the coloring book too, because I know how much my fiance loves coloring. So I was just like, all right, I'll upgrade to get the comic and the coloring book, so I can just give her the coloring book. So,
but hey, that reward tier is a great deal. For $20, you get Ghosts and Demons, you get the coloring book, and it includes postage.
Yes.
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 That's a deal.
That really is. And there was something else. There was another pledge that was actually a pretty good deal too. Now I'm looking at it right now so I can try to see which one it was. I think it was the catching up one too, where I think that was another one. And then you announced something about chocolates. Yes. I didn't read all of it.
Yeah, that I know it. She's a steampunk author and a chocolatier. She's part of the steampunk community. Her name is Nikki Woolfolk, and she lives and works in Connecticut. And we've known each other. We've actually never met face to face, but we've known each other out online for years and have chatted. And last year I wanted to do this with her, but we just couldn't get the timing worked out. But this year we did, and so it is a limited tier of 10 boxes, small boxes of chocolate. It's 4 pieces of a bittersweet chocolate with caramel filling, and also a little bar of chocolate with like a apple mosaic weaved into it, in a beautiful, beautiful box. And also the book. That's for $36. I mean, I think 5 out of the 10 that we have are already taken. But I'm very excited for her and to promote her. I've done this in the past. I haven't done that last couple Kickstarters just because of timing issues. But in earlier Kickstarters, I've worked with steampunk makers to create something specific for one of my Kickstarters as a way to give back to the steampunk community. They have been extraordinarily supportive of me and everything that I have done, and this way I'm able to give them, a little more promotion than they may not normally have. And so it's pretty exciting, and I was really happy to get Nikki on board this time. And her chocolate is really good. She sent me samples, so they're good.
Oh, boy. Well, and it is almost that time, even though it's going to be weight on it, but you could always, get your lady or your man, depending on, who's buying for who, some nice chocolate then for Valentine's Day, even though it's going to be over with. But hey, I mean, why not have that thought down the road when you get your lovely comic book and then you can read it and color with chocolates? Why not? That sounds like a great deal.
Yes, you can do that. The chocolate will, those who have ordered the chocolate tier, they will get their chocolate before their books. I will be contacting them separately to get their addresses early to get that out to them. But as for the books and everything, they'll have to wait for the surveys to go out, and that'll be a good month or so after we finish.
Well, that makes perfect sense. So that means just freeze the chocolate, people, and then wait for your stuff, and then eat them. Yeah. Well, Madeleine, before we wrap this up, because I don't want to take too much more of your time either, but because of the Women in Horror Month, I'll ask, does Women in Horror Month mean anything to you? I know you said you just recently heard about it, but I'm assuming you might have heard more of like what it's about and stuff, like celebrating women pretty much in the horror genre of how far they have come.
Well, unfortunately, women in horror still tend to get ignored, and I think this is a way to acknowledge the fact that there are many amazing women writers who are writing horror, and I think some people, because of their preconceptions of what women should or should not be, have a hard time wrapping their head around the fact that women can write horror, and they can, and they do it extremely well. I know a number of they're great, and so I think it's just to promote the fact that they exist, because I think a lot of people don't realize that many horror writers are women.
Yes. It's not just males having to dominate the entire whatever that they're doing. I mean, women can do it too, if not better. So, I will say that, because I've read some very interesting thing that women have either wrote or directed, and it's like, wow, like, this is really good, and I don't think a man could have thought of this, so that's my opinion, and I'll stick to it. So
okay, yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate your time as well, Madeleine. And real quick too, for future reference for people, is when the Kickstarter is over with, how can they find you to keep up with updates, and where can people find copies of your comic series?
Okay. The Kickstarter runs until the morning of Friday, February 21st. And you can always go to my website at bostonmetaphysicalsociety.com or my Facebook page to sign up for my newsletter, which is only monthly, so it won't, inundate your inbox and make you crazy. The first 6 issues, if you're not into Kickstarter or anything like that, but want to check out the original 6-issue miniseries, you can ask your local comic book store to order it. We were picked up by Source Point Press a year or so ago, and we're in Diamond Previews World, the individual issues last year. So we're actually, in comic book stores nationwide now. And the trade paperback will be in Previews World March, so in just a couple weeks. So if Kickstarter is not your thing, you can contact your local comic book store and ask them to order the trade paperback, and that has all of the original 6 issues plus a bonus 10-page story.
Very cool. And I will do my best to try to find as many links as possible for the episode description too, so that way they should have it all there for them as well. But okay. Once again, Madeleine, thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we can chat more in the future for your upcoming projects and everything else.
That would be great. Thank you very much, Paul.
Well, thank you again, and for everybody else listening, thank you for sticking around, and make sure that you are tucked in to your bed, because you just never know what type of ghosts are knocking on the window and what type of demons are scratching at your head.